our global business update, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Michael.
Morning. Asia Pacific, basically, people are very interested in what the outgoing Bank of Japan governor, he's Haruhiro Kuroda, of course, and they're wondering what he's going to say about Japan's ultra-loose monetary policy. That will happen probably late today, and then early tomorrow morning. Should be able to bring you the results of that then. Elsewhere, stocks relatively mixed, as you'd expect. Here's a name which will become very, very familiar to you unless you know it already. It's the online fashion store Shein, which is bigger than both H&M and Zara combined. That is likely to be the biggest IPO in the world when it happens later in the year. It'll probably take place in the United States. It's backed by the UAE as well, and it will be an enormous boost for the fashion industry. If you walk around China, you'll see people carrying bags with Shein on them. It's the online fashion retailer, and it's the biggest name that you've never heard of, basically. As far as the United States is concerned, futures are relatively flat. The idea that interest rates probably will be rising, not necessarily more quickly, but much bigger, by much bigger amounts than had been thought, is slowly taking place at the moment. BlackRock, for one, the big private equity company, is looking at rates of 6% by the end of the year. They are in the range of 4.5% to 4.75% right now, as you know, in the United States. The US has also been pushing back at the comments that we reported earlier this week from Qin Gang, who is the new Chinese foreign minister, who was saying that the US and China have diverted slightly from talking to each other. The US Commerce Secretary has actually hit back at that. The US is saying, no, we haven't, and we want to have close cooperation with China over the coming years. The US lender, now this is the US leading crypto bank, Silverline. It's going to shut down, and it's basically because the market for Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, particularly cryptocurrencies generally, is so difficult at the moment. They don't know really which way to go. And the continuing fallout from FTX is spooking investors a great deal. I call them investors. I'd much prefer to call them chancers, but if you want to call them investors, that's absolutely fine. But as far as cryptocurrency is concerned, the US largest bank is actually closing down. It could be, let's go to Ukraine, and whilst the war continues there, it could be that the deal will be renewed. As you know, it's probably going to run out. This is the deal between Russia and the Ukraine. Russia allowing Black Sea exports of grain to help the rest of the world. It's set to expire later this month. There's going to be talks in Geneva next week, and it may be that deal is renewed. As far as the UK is concerned, microprocessors, semiconductors, one particular boss has been talking about it, Scott White. He's been actually saying to the government, we need help. The whole industry sector needs help. It's getting subsidies in the United States. People will move abroad unless you do it. They think it's a very strategic industry which needs to be within the UK's borders. It's felt that manufacturers, unless they get some kind of government help, may well go abroad. The UK is also planning to loosen its rules for foreign workers, particularly in the construction industry. 1.2 million job vacancies, as you know, in this country. We've said that a lot before. And whilst there's a crackdown on illegal immigrants, it's felt that the government wants to loosen people who are particularly in occupations which are extremely short of labour, and that includes infrastructure and that includes house building to start with. So construction to start with, then see how it goes there. The UK Lloyd's of London, the insurance market, is now saying, there's the boss, he's now saying, look, for heaven's sake, what we need here is a 4-day is a 4-day week rather than a 3-day week. We want to get our Mondays back. He thinks it's essential that trade actually happens between live traders, and that's actually happening as we speak. So he wants to get Mondays back. At the moment, online trading has meant that people can actually be in Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, which are quite busy. He wants to never mind about Fridays, but they're saying get back on Monday for a 4-day week. And then finally, as far as oil's concerned, a major commodity, obviously, it's struggling really. The recession fears, higher interest rates in the United States, even though we're going to hear that the market is very, very tight. It's likely that WTO will be, as I said yesterday, trading within mid-70s to $80 a barrel, not much higher than that. And of course, until we get a firmer idea of the recovery in oil will continue to languish at its present levels. That's the global view.
Real quickly, Michael, let's talk about America. The Fed is saying they're going to increase the quotas at which they're going to pull up interest rates vis-a-vis the fact that inflation is coming out. Is it because of the 2% target? Because now the Fed is still pumping up interest rates, and you know that has a knock-on effect on the American economy.
I think the 2% target's a very interesting project, really. I mean, I think, don't you, that in the next few months we're going to see a bit of a recast about that, because I can't see any way in which inflation is going to get back to 2% anytime soon in the United States. And the Fed will have to make up its mind, just as all central banks do, as to whether to keep interest rates high. I mean, throughout the world, as I was saying earlier in the week, you know, people are recalibrating, aren't they, their expectations of where interest rates and inflation is going to go, particularly interest rates, particularly therefore the cost of debt, which is actually, whether you like it or not, rather important. And so I suspect that the United States, like a lot of other countries, will recalibrate that 2%.
All right, let's talk about Lloyd's asking for a 4-day or pushing for a 4-day working week, particularly because we have analyzed on the show the impact or productivity of staff working from home, some big businesses for, some against. Your thoughts on this, and how would this shape other organizations as big as Lloyd's embracing this as well?
Well, remember that we're not talking about Lloyd's Bank, we're talking about Lloyd's insurance market. So it's got one office in London, which is quite important. And the people who actually operate within that are very important, as far as the other things that the sandwich bars and all the other ancillary parts of the city that depend on those people coming back to work. My personal view about working away from the office is absolutely fine if you want to do it, but you're not getting career development if you do that. All you're doing is you're looking at a screen, much in the same way that we are right now, instead of actually being there in the flesh, talking to people and saying, this is how you do things. Because that's where a lot of young people actually get their first experience of life, from working in an office, and they can see things that ought to be done and things that oughtn't to be done. And the crafty ones actually copy what the older people do and then are wary of their mistakes. That's all about growing up, and it's all about rubbing shoulders with your colleagues. I think it's absolutely essential. I don't believe in the working from home thing. I think it's here to stay. And I feel as though as it becomes more and more expensive to travel, particularly in the UK, not so sure about countries with large and good public transport services, particularly in France, for example. But if that's what you're asking me, I think it's better to be in the office.
Well, two quick things, Michael. First, the State Department, U.S. State Department, says it doesn't want to decouple from China, and that, you know, China is important. But you recall that Anthony Blinken, about last year or so, was accusing China of asymmetric decoupling, which he describes as China trying to make itself less dependent on the rest of the world and trying to make the rest of the world dependent on China. Isn't the U.S. guilty of the same thing? So if they say we're not trying to separate from China, what in real terms do the Americans mean? And secondly, Sir Nigel Wilson, the chief executive of L&G, has been expressing concern about London, the stock exchange, becoming unattractive. He says London is a low-wage economy, low productivity, low incentive economy that is fraught by political infighting. He's recommending reforms to planning and financial rules. What exactly do you think is the kind of reform that the London Stock Exchange needs so that businesses, investments will not be running in droves to the United States, which is now the case?
I would point out that which particular country are you thinking of that is not riven with political debate and political division? I can't think of one personally, but maybe you can. Are people leaving London in droves? No, they aren't. Is London losing large IPOs? Yes, it is. Why is that? Because they're going to New York. Why is that? Because that's where the money is, and that's where shareholders feel as though they'll get a better return. Nothing is going to change that. I think there will be a certain kind of equilibrium. Who says that these IPOs are properly valued in the first place? Let's see where Shine goes, as I started my report this morning. Let's see where ARM goes. Will SoftBank get the 16 billion that they spent buying it? I have no idea. I mean, it may be that that's where they go. But remember, all IPOs are, as you know, they are a gamble, and a price is set. And whether or not they get that depends on the success of the IPO. What does London need to do? What I would suggest, it needs to concentrate on smaller businesses, making sure that those smaller exchanges actually somehow extend into the FTSE 100, which, as you know, tends to comprise the larger multinational companies. What the stock exchanges are not doing is acting locally. That's what I'd be pushing. I wouldn't care whether the balance actually goes to New York or to Paris, because it'll seek the money. I mean, that's just a sense of gravity. That's what happens in the capital markets. But I think if you're talking about helping an economy, then it'd be much more sensible for stock. I mean, there used to be local stock markets in this country, in the UK, and there used to be federal stock markets in the United States. It tends to concentrate on Wall Street. I think that's a big mistake, personally. As far as China's concerned and the United States, trade war's like a slow death, isn't it? I mean, you can, with the wisdom of hindsight, you can look back, see what Anthony Blinken said a few months ago, and see what they're saying now. It's weighing up. I mean, as the world is trying to find a direction away from globalization, whether it be onshoring, whether, as you were pointing out the other day, Doctor, that Saudi, for example, is suddenly interested in Iran, is suddenly interested in Turkey, is suddenly interested in the Balkans. Why? Because the power is the centers of power are actually changing. How long will it take to work itself out? I do not know the answer to that question, but that's what's going on.
Well, thank you very much, Michael. Now for business updates across the African continent. Rotus Odiri is here. Good morning, Rotus.
Good morning, all. We're just getting some breaking news here from one of our reporters that there's been an accident at the PWD Shogunle rail crossing. Apparently, two female staff of the state government are dead and several injured while the bus was trying to cross that rail crossing, and the train apparently hit it coming from Abeokuta. And I think we'll update our viewers soon. But it's pretty tragic there, pretty ghastly images coming from there. But so passenger train crushed a Lagos State government's staff bus at PWD Junction. There we go, Ikeja area of the states this morning. Train was coming from Agege and met a BRT vehicle with the Lagos State government workers on board. Crossing the rail to link Ikeja GRA, and it's pretty much, it's been so far uncertain the number of casualties, but we're seeing images coming in through from there. So it's tragic stuff, but that's just coming in. But still, you were just talking with Michael Wilson about businesses, and again, another tragedy, the market in Ajegunle, I think is Akere, right? Where there was a fire. We had the governor of Lagos State visit there, and also the candidate for the gubernatorial candidate for the Labour Party also visiting as well. We're talking about condolences and so on and so forth. There have been a number of fires in these markets. We've talked a lot about micro-insurance and how a lot of these businesses need to be protected. We talked about Kenya's low insurance penetration just last week. Nigeria is barely 1%. So still, despite, and again, I don't know if there was foul play here. There's been alleged that there's been some foul play, but there's still the issue of making sure that these businesses are protected, because they're all in clusters, and when one catches fire, well, it spreads. So as far as this, now with this election now being postponed for another week, you're going to now be talking about how jittery businesses are. Ekiti States, they have essentially announced a wealth fund, Ekiti State Wealth Fund, which is, I think, is first sub-national one in Nigeria. So there's some tweets from Akin Oyebode, who is the Commissioner for Finance in Ekiti State. And we've got some tweets from him where he announced the when he announced the fact that Ekiti State is going to be launching its wealth fund. So he says, today is a great day. Our Ekiti State Wealth Fund bill approved by the State Executive Council and transmitted to the State House of Assembly for consideration. When passed, it will be the first sub-sovereign wealth fund in Nigeria. And it's always good to get good news coming from the States. The fund will have a stabilization fund for a rainy day with strict conditions for withdrawal, future generation fund in liquid assets, so most likely equities and so on, and an investment facilitation fund to CROs in private capital, and we're seeding it with 1 billion naira day one. And then he gives a shout out to Governor Biodun Oyebanji, saying that he, shout out to him, he backed it wholeheartedly, made it possible, and it's one of the unsung heroes who drafted and reviewed the bill that's being sent for legislative consideration. It will most likely pass. Finally, Kenya. This is interesting since we've all been talking about the BVAS matter. Kenya has launched eTIMS, which is an electronic tax management system. They had initially their physical tax management system required devices, and it required businesses to use those devices to integrate. Now they've gone cloud, and basically there are 4 touch points. I think using apps, using desktop computers, and also the virtual control units that allow third-party businesses to latch on. They will be able to track transactions in real time. Is there any difference between the Kenya Revenue Authority being able to track a transaction that is happening in real time with a business and INEC being able to track a vote that's being made in real time? We really have to make sure we get things right with our technology.
But it's possible.
First, before we comment on what Rotus has presented, let's take a look at that breaking news again. A passenger train has crushed a Lagos State government BRT staff bus at PWD Junction, Ikeja area of the state this morning. The train was coming from Agege and met a BRT vehicle with the Lagos State government workers on board, crossing the rail to link Ikeja GRA, one of their sympathizers said. It was uncertain the number of casualties, but the BRT bus was smeared with the fresh blood of victims. So sad, bloodbath on Thursday morning.
Well, how does that happen? On
the day people wake up in the morning, going to work, only to be crushed in this kind of tragic incident. Well, we'll come back to it. So sad.
It's a very bad sight and so sad. I just pray for the repose of those souls. Very sad one. But let me come to Kenya. When you look at the technology antecedents, actually, you should be able to track real-time election votes in Nigeria with the kind of money put into the elections in Nigeria. And that's why you see I keep saying we need to investigate INEC. Over 350 billion, you can't still get elections right. Look at the ordinary interface. Rotus, I mean tech. Look at how poor. So with over 350 billion, look at how poor the interface for IRV. Is it that they couldn't get a UI UX designer?
If this thing is a tablet, a BVAS, look at it. This thing is a tablet. It just has a front camera and a finger
software.
And just take a picture.
So when we say these
upload.
Things, when you say these things now, they say, "Oh, Rufai, shut up! You are talking rubbish."
It's just a tablet.
Blah, 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 blah. But you see, we in this business, we know these things. Ordinary common interface couldn't be gotten. That's why I say we should still investigate what happened. But Kenya is leading the way. I think we should learn from them.
All right, so let's still talk about elections, Ruth. It's a very interesting conversation with regards to the cost of elections, using the Akere Market fire incident as a case study, especially because, as you said, there's suspicion of foul play. And just to mention that for people who are, perpetrators of this, we must remember that at the end of the day, it's the people that suffer. It's the poor people, the poorest of the poor, that suffer when things like this happen. Yesterday, a number of Lagosians lost their means of livelihood. As they thankfully, thank God for the contributions or donations that have come through, but there will still be massive impact. We haven't still, survived from the infrastructure that was destroyed in 2020. And so when there are agitations like this and you burn the livelihoods or you destroy the livelihoods of Lagosians, you're doing more harm than good to the people themselves, not the elites.
Well, to go back to the rail incident, it's a metaphor for the condition of Nigeria, the inefficiency, the incompetence, the failure of the state. Once upon a time in this country, if a vehicle was approaching a rail crossing line, there would be early notification by the approaching train and also by officials at that junction. But these days, people take over the rail lines. There's no consideration for safety. And then you have this kind of tragedy.
How can this happen? How?
Imagine people going to work in the morning with a lot of hope. And their Lagos government staff, that BRT bus is Lagos government staff bus, only to end up either in the mortuary or in the hospital. It's very sad. We hope that the Lagos state government will take a look at this and pay more attention to safety considerations. Too many lives are wasted in this country.
Too many doctors.
Because the Nigerian state,
unnecessary.
because the Nigerian state fails the people. As for Ekiti State, World Fund, yes, well, the State House of Assembly will still have to approve.
Yeah.
The seed fund is 1 billion.
Yes.
And if you look at it, it's patterned after the National Sovereign Fund, managed by the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority, NSIA. Okay, have they learned any lessons from the NSIA, how it is managed?
Yeah.
The Ekiti State government, in terms of resources, do they have the capacity? What are the details? We have not seen the details to be able to assess it. I hope this is not a cut and paste initiative. Oh, federal government has done sovereign fund. Let us also do it.
Right.
However, the principle behind it makes sense.
Yeah.
The whole idea of a sovereign wealth fund is to save for the rainy day and to use all of that, to develop, to grow. And that's why there is a stabilization fund, there is an infrastructure fund, apart from the seed fund of 1 billion, which I must say, well,
it's quite
small.
I get you. It's, growing.
Anyway,
and I
thank
trust
you,
it.
Rotus.
Trust it. Thank you so much.